Now, we have a few submissions of the structure and skin thing, and I'm going to go through each of those and talk about each of them. But I want people to remember that when we go through this kind of stuff, when I critique something, I am critiquing it in direct relationship to the assignment parameters. I'm not telling you whether or not it's good. Um, and I think that's an important distinction because these assignments are supposed to be, or the things that you make for these assignments are supposed to demonstrate a certain kind of relationship with three dimensions. And it has very little to do with how good you are as an artist. And it has everything to do with solving the problems that are put in front of you. Like for this structure and skin, we have to have modules. We have to have the modules repeated. We have to engage three-dimensional space, and we have to employ the use of skin. Excuse me. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk about the next assignment, which is the biomorphic abstraction. It's the foam carving. And then we are going to be looking at, um, well, as part of that process, we're going to be looking at what non-objectivism is, what abstraction is, what biomorphic is. We'll talk about those things a little bit. Next week, what I want to see is everybody else's structure and skin stuff done. I want people to be comfortable with what they understand between, for example, where what they submitted is at and what needs to be done to get a perfect score so they can resubmit. And we are going to be talking more about the biomorphic abstraction. I think one thing that's really important to remember on this as we do these assignments is that everything can be resubmitted as many times as you need so that you can get perfect score. Now, Liv or Anna, have either of you um, resubmitted something for more points in this class so far?
I think I have. I can't quite remember though.
Okay. Um, and Liv is typing something in. Okay, and Liv said that they did, but I've not checked on them. When I'm trying to make sure that as soon as something is resubmitted, I will regrade it. And one thing that I noticed with the annotated bibliographies that people were submitting, I would say something about what needs to be edited. It needs to be in this kind of order and stuff like that. And there's still some of those that need to be resubmitted, but generally people within a couple days would fix the issues, resubmit it so that I could regrade it and they get more points. I have had in that annotated bibliography thing, um, somebody submitted it and it needed to have the accessed on dates at the end of each citation. So they did that, and then it also needed to be in alphabetical order, and they did that. So it took them about 4 resubmissions to get everything sorted out. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. It doesn't hurt me at all, and I would rather you do that so that you can make sure you get all of the points for the assignment. There's no reason anybody in this class cannot get an A. I mean, there's no reason for anybody not to get an A in this class. So keep that in mind. And as I go through and grade the structure and skin stuff, I will say things that need to be redone or reworked on if they need to be, to go ahead and take care of that and resubmit it. Last year we had somebody who went through that process with me about 6 times and then got perfect points because they by the end of that process they understood what the assignment was and they did a great job. So that's something to keep in mind, and I want you guys to know that the final score is rarely the final score because you do have the option to resubmit. I also want, we're going to touch on the quiz a little bit. We're going to talk about what people have submitted. And as we talk about what people have submitted, I want to make sure that you guys understand that whatever critique I offer is so that we can make sure and get more points. So, Anna and Liv, do you guys understand that? Excellent. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the share. All right, looks like I lost you for just a sec, but it looks like we're back. Okay, so this is the first one we're going to look at. Now, we've looked, I want to also look at the sample assignments. Or we're going to go, these are the three samples that I showed you, so we talk about them. One of the assignment parameters is you need to make a module that's about the size of your fist, and you need to replicate it 5 to 8 times. You need to attach cardboard or skin of some sort, paper, it could be a number of different things on that in such a way so that in some parts of the sculpture we can see through and see the structure, and some parts the skin hides it. But we want it to feel balanced. And we also need it, the third thing is we need it to interact with the volume of space around it. So it can't just be flat, it can't just be a tower, it can't just be an arch. It needs to interact with the three-dimensional volume of space around it. Now, as we look at these three examples, this one on the left and this one in the middle both demonstrate that three-dimensional module. The one on the right, not so much. It's not as easy to see. I think it's going to be these two trapezoids that are joined at the narrow point. This is really good at interacting with three-dimensional space, but doesn't do a very good job of fulfilling that requirement of the replicated module. This one does a pretty good job of that of the replicated module, but it also demonstrates that not all the modules have to be identical, and that's fine. This one is a really good example of 8 modules that are all identical. In the case of these two, this person on the left used a shape that was kind of like an orange crate, and in the middle, they used several different triangles coming together. So and I wanted to show you something else, and I'm going to put a link of this on that website. I mean, not on the assignment page, because modules that we're looking at are going to be relatively simple shapes like this, or tetrahedron, a cube, octahedron, something like that. Not any more complicated than that. This is a good shape to make as a replicate a module. This five-sided pyramid. We have the four uh, triangular sides and then a square side at the bottom. We have this kind of shape, which is a leaning pyramid. And they can be distorted too. We have shapes that are kind of prisms and crystals. Like this is a truncated pyramid. This is a simple prism, a three-sided prism. I don't want you to, and this is a good shape. We already looked at that kind of thing, or this where it's leaning over. I don't want you to feel like you need to do something like this I think this kind of shape, these more complicated shapes would be terrible for you to do as a module, because it would just all your time would be spent just making them. But some of these simple ones, like a cone, would be interesting. One person in another class made a module that was kind of like this, except it was these upright triangle sides were long and skinny, and the bottom side was really narrow, and it ended up looking almost like a trumpet, kind of, a geometric trumpet. So these are these kind of simple shapes. tetrahedron, four-sided pyramid, cube, eight-sided structure, an octahedron, eight-sided pyramid. This kind of thing, which I don't know what the name of this is, but it's has some hollow spots in it. Here's a five-sided pyramid, leaning pyramid, a crystalline structure, simple prisms like that. These are the things I want you to be concentrating on when you do your module. So when we look back at this, you can see this was this is called a square pyramid, square prism. Sorry, where it looks like an orange crate. This looks like a triangle stuck to two other triangles, where it's not one of those simple geometric shapes, but it is a three-dimensional geometric shape of some sort, but just not from the polyhedra.net website. This one starts straying away from that, but if you make it consistent enough, I think we could talk about allowing it to work. Now, so I want you to keep in mind those kinds of things. And so as we go through these, the ones that we look at tonight, again, we're not evaluating whether or not it's worthwhile art, because all of it is. What we are doing is just evaluating whether or not it fits the assignment parameters. So if we look at this oh, I'm sorry. Looking at this one, this is the first one we'll look at. So this is kind of two diamonds joined into a box. And on this, we can see what the module is. We can identify the module pretty easily. The photograph, they did a really good job. It looks like they may have used the photo studio at the building, which is really great. I wonder if somebody is trying to get in. I hear this little beeping every once in a while. I wonder if it's somebody trying to get in, but I don't see how I can let them in. So hopefully they'll try again soon. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I just erased what I was trying to share with you guys. So let's do that again. All right, here we go. So we have this repeatable module that is repeated. They put skin on a couple of different, it looks like they put skin on the two sides of all the modules. So that fits. They use the photo studio it looks like they used the photo studio at the building, the Gunter Trades building. So that's really cool. That's nicely done. Now there are some things that we talked about last week when we were looking at examples over the last couple of years. One is if you have a repeatable module, a lot of us do have a tendency to turn it into something like a Lego block, a stacking block, where they fit together in even rows. It's nice and looks very stable. For this assignment, since one of the big things is activating the volume of space around it, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have all the skin on the same side. Remember, it needs to look balanced. And we don't want it, we want, as part of the process of activating three-dimensional space, we want to play with the idea that everywhere you stand around it, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fascinating. We want it to go through a 3D volume. So for this one, I really like the modules. I think those are great. But what I would recommend for this one is to separate these modules out and then start stacking them again. And maybe don't line up. We don't want to have the flat sides lined up. We don't want all the skin all to be on one side of the sculpture. We want it to be around. On this structure, I think this would benefit from maybe leaving this one where it is, but this one rotating it to the left a little bit, maybe this one sliding towards us and rotating to the right kind of thing. Maybe this one is going to be attached completely diagonally, and then this one at another angle altogether. And maybe the sides aren't going to be the things that attach. Maybe we only have an edge of a stick that's attached at an angle. So this doing something like that, when you stack it, it kind of calms the energy down. When you rotate the different blocks and attach them at different angles, the energy is increased and it makes it a lot more engaging for an audience. The other thing that I would recommend on this is all in one plane. Yeah, it loops around, but it loops around all in one plane. This could lay flat and it would function at it, it would not activate the volume of space around it. So if we did what we're talking about, rotating these things, moving them around, sliding them off from each other, making some of them look a lot less stable, where they're only attached by an edge or something, maybe. Doing that is going and paying attention to the volume of space all around it. So wherever somebody approaches it, it doesn't look flat. And they have skin, some of the skin is facing them wherever they are. Um, that would really give this a lot of energy and bring this a lot closer to the parameters and intent of the assignment. So for this person, I would rotate these around so that the skin is facing us in some. Maybe some of these are laid on another side, but think about different ways that you can put it together so it doesn't feel like a Lego tower like this, like set of structures. So, what's combined together in such a stable appearing way. Now, as I talk about that and talk through that, do you guys are you getting an understanding of what I'm talking about? And Anna, the screen is showing now, right? Okay. All right, good. Okay, so that's one, and then I want to share another one with you. This is one that I think is really well made, and I they used the sheet for the background, which is great. However, I'm seeing a lot of diamond shapes, but I'm not seeing that module. We talked about it last couple of weeks. It needs to be a three-dimensional module about the size of your fist. And these are flat planes. This looks like, no, it looks like triangles there. What I would recommend on this one is to have this person make several more of these diamond shapes and see if you can make a module with those diamond shapes in a triangle. And I'm thinking three of these diamond shapes together, meeting at a point, and then three more triangles at the bottom would make a very, very interesting module. Make or 5 to 8 of those and start putting it together, and that would be really fascinating. I love what they've done with the skin. I think that is really cool. And I think if they went revisited this and worked on that module structure, this could turn out into something really spectacular, meeting the parameters of the assignment. So again, the diamonds themselves are sides, they're facets. That is not a three-dimensional module like we talked about. So I think if this person went back and rebuilt that with that rebuilt or built those modules with that in mind, and then just started stacking them and playing with how they go together, I think that this could be really very interesting. I like how they address the question of the skin. I think that was really well done. Okay, give me just a second as I adjust things here. Okay. Now, this one I think is well photographed. It has that white screen behind it. That's always good. It looks to me like the module is two of these kite shapes with shorter bracers holding them together. So it's almost like a kite-shaped box. Now, as we look at this, I see one of the things, the modules don't have to be identical. And this person, it looks like they did a couple different sizes. Some of them are smaller. I think that turned out really well. One thing that I really like about this is look at how they've attached it. Things are not set up like Legos. You know, they're at different angles. They're attached in different ways. Like this kite-shaped place here, two of its faces join with the faces of others, but in different orientations. You know, you have long face attached here and a short face attached to one of the long faces there. The papers are the skins are attached on different facets, different sides. I think that looks really, really interesting. And it really does a really solidly good job of activating the three-dimensional space around it. You see how it's going in all sorts of different directions. This is great. Another one of the parameters of the assignment is to try to balance the structure and skin. And I see skin on the far side here. I see some skin over here and over here, but I really believe this needs more skin. And some of the places I'd suggest it is maybe some side panels right here. Um, maybe a small panel right here. This one I think is great. Right here, maybe a small panel here. Maybe something, um, maybe a kite-shaped panel here in the front. Maybe a side panel here. You know, another kite-shaped panel there. What I would recommend this person do is cut a couple different pieces of paper, um, maybe 4 or 5, not the full exact size or shape that anything needs, but just enough that you can kind of play with placement to see if it feels if you can get it to feel a little bit more balanced. Um, I think this right here, these 3 pieces, this feels pretty good. This right here feels pretty good. This is coming really close. I think it may need 1 or 2 more pieces of paper. And right through here, this feels really open. And I think 1 or 2 pieces of skin going through here um, would really put this over the top. But I like this because it's well photographed. I like this because you can identify the module right away. I like it because they playing with the orientation of how they put them together. And I like it because not all the modules are the same size. So I think this one is really looking very good. The only thing that I would suggest on this is adding a little bit more skin. What do you guys, Anna and Liv, what do you think about what we just talked about? What do you think about this sculpture?
Um, I don't have a lot to add. I didn't immediately notice that it was kind of lacking some skin, but maybe that's because it's white and it has the white cloth in the background. So it's kind of hard to see where it really was. But
Hmm. I think
um,
this area right through here is interesting to me because the skin is in front and hides the sticks. And on these two, can you see how the skin is in the back and it kind of frames the sticks?
yeah,
I like that. I think that that's really cool. And I like how this piece of skin right here and this piece of skin right there are at totally different angles and orientations. I just think the only thing that I think that this needs is a little bit more skin. But can you see what I'm talking about when I talk about how it's put together, the orientation of the different modules, how they're not all the same, how some of them rotate, and by doing that, it makes it so that this really helps to engage three-dimensional space around it. Can you see that?
yeah. The different rotations really make you feel the 3D space. I like it.
And I think what's kind of fun about that too is if this person wanted to, they could they don't have to use this as the bottom of the sculpture. I mean, they could turn it in almost any which way they wanted to, and there's a good chance it would look interesting. I think that, yeah, I'm liking that one. I think it's coming along great. Okay, I'm trying to orient the next one. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Let me share this with you. All right. And looking at this one, they used a white background. They used cardboard for the skin, and they used toothpicks. And this is one of the ones that we looked at last week as well. On this right away, I can see they have variations on a module, but the module is pretty well defined. It is that milk crate kind of box structure. I think that does a great job. I mean, because you can identify it right away. But this one looks a little bit shorter. This one looks a little bit shorter. This one's obviously longer, longer, longer. And this one looks like maybe two long ones stacked. So they kept the module form, and we can tell it's a module because it's the same shape over and over again. But they had some fun changing up the size a little bit. And I think that's really cool. Another thing I like is that they put the skin on different orientations. Two small pieces here, a long piece and a small piece there, small and long, just having fun with that. And I think that looks really good. Um, I also like how it's oriented and I mean, these are not stacked like Lego bricks at all. They are attached in all sorts of different ways. And I think it's a really excellent solution because it can't help but activate the volume of space around it. Oh, and I'm sorry, I missed Liv made a comment too on that previous one. We're going to go back to that just really quickly. And Liv's comment on this is um, it's much more structure based, but the shapes are very unique. Yeah, and they are. They're very interesting. They're almost like kite-shaped prisms. So yes, very good. Thank you for that. I'm sorry I did not see your comment. Now, coming back to this one, what do you guys think about this one? Can you both of you see the modules and how they're kind of playing with the size on that? Anna, what are your thoughts on this one that we're looking at?
I really like the orientation they chose. I think it fits really nicely with the long modules. And I do like the placement of the skin. I think
Yeah,
this one,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
this one balances it well.
there's not an awful lot of skin, but with it being so heavy, I think that counteracts that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
What do you think about how the different modules are attached to each other and activating the volume of space around it?
I like that they're all at different orientations, except for maybe one on the top. But yeah, and most of them are pointing upwards. It gives it a very tall sense of space.
Can you see what I'm talking about when I describe activating the volume of space around it?
Yes, it,
Oh,
it doesn't look flat.
excellent. Excellent. What do you think about this, Liv? All right. It looks like one of the recurring things that kind of I hope we can fix completely is that sometimes I lose people or I lose the connection just when I do the screen sharing. So I'm really sorry about that if that's what happened. But what I'm hearing from you is a lot of the same kind of things that I'm seeing in these. And I'm really glad because I think, I really hope that, when we went over the 20 or 30 things last week and looked at each of them, I'm really hoping that that helped people to understand the kind of stuff that we're looking for. And so these ones that have been turned in, I'm going to go ahead and grade them. And if you don't have a perfect score, please, watch this video and see what needs to be tweaked a little bit, because there's nobody that takes these classes that are anything other than really good artists. It just sometimes, for the assignments, we need to adjust things so that they fit the parameters and expectations of the assignment. Now, another thing that I wanted to, so we looked at the polyhedra.net structures. We looked at those kinds of things. One of the things that I want to talk about now is I want to shift into talking about the next assignment. And I'm thinking it says it's due next week, but I'm thinking it would be better to kind of add a week to it so people have a little bit more time to play with it. And before we get into that, I do want to look at the quiz. So I'm going to open that up. I'm just going to go down it real quick, and talk about some of the issues that people have been having with the quiz. And if this is you, please let me know, because I last class, I think we may have come up with a solution. So this is what the quiz looks like. And one of the problems that people have been having is that there are pictures that are not showing up, or there are links that are not working. And what's really aggravating to me is that this is what I see. And you guys can tell all the images are here. All the images are showing. If images are not showing up, if you have a blank box, like what happened for this image here, let me know and I will fix it. And one of the suggestions made was just make a PDF for each of the images. Until I've got this fixed so that everybody can check it out, make a PDF and email it to people, before the quiz is due, so you guys can see it. Now, I do try to have the artwork title with the artist's name every time that there's an image, so that if the picture is not showing up, then you guys at least know, can find it online. Now, Liv or Anna, have either of you had issues with the photos in the quizzes?
The photos worked fine for me.
Okay, good. And I'm wondering if, because not every, and it's not by any means, it's about maybe a quarter of people across both classes that were using these quizzes are having issues, and doesn't seem to be completely consistent. So if you are having issues, let me know if you can't see it, and I will, do whatever we need to so that you can take the quiz effectively. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about um, delineated forms and negative space in relationship to this quiz, because these are things that we're going to need in our as we move forward to the next assignment too. Delineated forms are forms that are outlined but not with a drawn outline. So there are aspects of the sculpture that guide our minds to see a form where a form isn't explicitly made. This is a sculpture done by a friend of ours named Adam Thomas that is really a good example of delineated forms that are very clear to see. As an example, one delineated form is made by these two overlapping circle pieces of the ladders. Right here, here's another delineated circle. It's not outlined with a drawn line, but the form is clearly a circle. Another delineated form is where these two rungs of the ladders connect with the side pieces of the ladder. So we have a rectangle right here, and there's, all the way around, there's several of those, and then the two circles. Do you guys understand what delineated forms are? Your textbook talks about this, but that's all it is. And artists use words like delineated or terracotta and stuff like that just to make people who aren't artists feel inadequate. Um, the delineated forms are basically the shapes that the contours of the sculptures define. That's pretty much all it is. So we go down and look, the delineated forms here are going to be this area right along here, underneath the torso and underneath the elbows of this figure. Or the scoop out is another delineated form. We can see that pretty clearly. This is a delineated form that also happens to be a solid form of the object, of the sculpture. But I use this, and delineated forms are all these window shapes too, over here in the building. Those are all delineated forms where they're not consciously drawn, but your eye still sees those shapes. Your mind still reads those shapes. Now, this is talking about negative space. And if when people lose points on this, it's because they aren't very clear about how they're talking about or defining negative space, or they forget about the last part of the question, which is think about what the piece would be like if the negative space is not there or is filled in some way. Um, if you don't talk about that, you lose some points as well. If we look at this, the negative space is everywhere the sculpture is not. And again, it's one of those, it's called negative space just so that artists can show they're smarter than the people that aren't artists. It's everything that the sculpture is not is the negative space. What I love about this piece by Henry Moore is that the way he does it is it makes you feel as if the sculpture is leaning against and propping itself up on the air around it, almost like this torso. Yeah, the weight is being held up by these arms, but the torso almost feels like it's leaning into that negative space, the volume of air underneath it. It almost feels supported by it. And to be honest, if the negative space wasn't here, this would just be a big old blob of white goo. I mean, there wouldn't be any of these forms that we can identify, and there definitely wouldn't be this feeling that the space around it is being activated, that this leg form is pushing towards us, that this head is up above us, and the torso right underneath the neck is going away from us. We can see all and feel all these things in large part because of Henry Moore's understanding of how to relate this object with the negative space around it. I think that that's fascinating. When we talk about, there's another um, quiz that talks about scale. And there's three different, yeah, right here, not another quiz. It's this quiz that talks about scale. One of the common things that people miss is I'm asking you to talk about, at least briefly, on each of the three different scales being shown here. And a lot of people will one part of the question, they'll have a sentence where they'll say scale is important because it emotionally does this to you, or it does this to you emotionally. And then the second part of the question will be, I feel this way when I look at the top sculpture. I feel this way when I look at the middle one and this scale. And I feel a different way when I look at Slinkachu's teeny tiny scale stuff. So both of those observations need to be in here. And the second observation about scale specifically needs to have three parts to it, one for each of those three scales being shown. And then this one, I think that both this question and this question here, there is not a right answer. Which of these do you feel activates space the best? I don't really care what you say about which one. I'm sorry, I don't care which one you pick. I do care what you say about it and how you uh, describe why you made that choice. because we picked these because all three of these activate space in a very different way. This is activate space almost kinetically, where it feels like even though it's a stationary object, it's continually moving out. This activates space because it feels like it's leaning over and it's almost ready to fall down. And this activates space psychologically because it wants to engage with the viewer. So each of them activate it very differently. And whichever one you pick, I doesn't bother, I don't really care which one you pick. You get the points because you're able to articulate why you think it activates space. And this is the same kind of question. This is very strong. This image is very strong with the skin, presence of the sculpture. This one is very strong with the structure, presence of the sculpture. Which of those you pick is most important doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is your description as to why you picked what you did. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. And Liv just said, I think this is in reference to the delineated forms described in the quiz that is also in the textbook. So there is a really good definition in there of the textbook. And Liv says it makes a lot more sense now talking about that. So excellent. Very good. Yeah. And some of these questions, if you don't have access to the textbook, it's going to make it very difficult because the answers that you find on the internet are not going to work for the quiz. So if you don't have access to, if you haven't bought yourself a textbook, go to the library and a student from another class, whenever a quiz is coming up, they'll go to the library, check out the book and have the pages scanned for the chapters that they need, and then they can get those scans emailed to them. And that's a good way of doing it too, if you can make it to the Fulton Library. All right. So, oh, okay. So Anna did have the textbook. It just wasn't making sense. Okay. But Anna, is it making sense now that we talked about it? Okay, good. Anna says yes. Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna show you a little bit about what the next assignment is, and we're gonna talk about that. And I'm gonna just share my page here so you can see my screen. All right, the car biomorphic abstraction. Everybody has a big block of foam in their kit, and that's what you're carving. I even made a video that is attached in the assignment that shows you the process. Now, when I made this video, it was a couple years ago, and I didn't understand until I posted it that you couldn't see a lot of the carving. You just see the back of my head as I'm working on it. Um, but I'm showing the parts of the process that you go through in carving the block into a biomorphic abstraction. And I will show you where that video is linked. If you go to the Carve Biomorphic assignment page, this first blue link right here, labeled Inspiring Demonstration of the Process, that takes you to the video. And the video is a little bit over an hour long, and you can watch it, fast forward, whatever. But I go through and demonstrate how to start carving on your shape and making it. The carving itself is probably not going to take an awful long time. Um, the thing that will take time is designing it and then also smoothing it down. And on here, you also see that I have several links that talk about different aspects of this assignment. Now, first one I clicked on, it's from the Tate, and I will show you what this is. The Tate has an introduction to what biomorphic means. And when we talk about biomorphic, what we're talking, bio means life, morphic means changing. So these are elements that look dynamic or a little bit of motion to them that come from life. Now, you're not making a sculpture that's moving, but you're making a sculpture that feels dynamic. If we look at this looks like a couple beans put together. But the artist, you notice that these shapes are not geometric. They feel organic. And I say bean shape because it kind of reminds me a little bit of beans, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence. They didn't literally make anything that exists in the actual world. What they're doing is they're making something that feels like you caught it in motion. It feels like, I don't know if you've picked up a leaf and just stared at a leaf. Your eyes kind of follow the contours. It feels very living. That's why it's organic and not geometric. That's the kind of shape that we're looking for. And I talked through some of this carving is relates to balsa wood and right there. There's also examples of the kinds of forms that are created. And since one of the big things we're talking about, and I'm going to go back to the module itself. This is an earlier section in the module. That was just the assignment we're looking at. If we go back to this, notice it's called biomorphic abstraction. Biomorphic means organic, an evidence of moving life. Doesn't have to be moving itself. I don't want it to be moving, but it needs to feel like something that your eye can follow around, that you're tempted to touch. And the abstraction part is the part that I want to talk a little bit more about. And we'll go over more about this next week as well. But for right now, I want to address the idea of what abstraction is. Most of you that are in this class, your professional training comes down to working with imagery that other people can recognize easily. Very few people draw what they see. Almost nobody does. Or paint what they see. Almost nobody paints what they see. But almost everybody, as artists, we paint or draw or produce what we think about what we're seeing. And something like this, it's obvious this is a tree, not just because I labeled it tree, but this is a painting that somebody did. And I think we'd all agree that this is pretty realistic. But if we go right in, it's not super realistic. The leaves, the individual leaves, when we go right in, they don't look like actually like leaves. The branches are just strings of paint. But what makes it naturalistic is the artist put these dabs of color down and these fields of paint down in such a way that they are showing what they're thinking about what they're seeing in order to communicate with us as much as they can what they've seen. And so when we look at this, we can right away recognize where the light is coming from. We can recognize that it's probably in fall. We can see that this is a tree because we recognize this is a trunk structure, and it connects really deeply with a lot of the visual symbols we've developed in our brains to help us recognize and remember naturalistic trees. So this is not abstract at all. This is very naturalistic. This is one of my favorite American schools of painting. It's called Hudson River School. And this style is kind of a romantic version of naturalism, where the tree, it almost feels like it has a personality of its own. And we can tell right away there's trees there, there's rocks, there's moss on the rocks, there's trees down here. We can see trees receding into the distance. We can see a field down here. We can see mountains and clouds in the background. When we recognize all this, we go in really close, we don't see individual leaves. They're just dabs of color. But the artist has done it in such a way that we are recognizing the same kinds of elements that mark it as a naturalistic tree or a naturalistic mountain as the artists have recognized. We're communicating back and forth and seeing that. Now, what if the artists are trying to communicate something different than a romantic notion of a natural landscape? This is a type of painting. It's Shahnameh style miniature painting. This had origination in Transoxiana, right around India and Iran, in that part of the world. And there's a very specific reason why this looks the way it does. Now, Liv or Anna, can you identify what this principal object is in the middle of this image? It's a tree, right? Liv said it's a tree. Yes, it is a tree. But if you or me, if any of us saw this as a tree in the real world, I think we would all think we were losing our minds because it is identifiable as a tree, but it's not naturalistic. This is called stylization. One thing you notice is that all the leaves are flat, they're facing towards us, and they're almost all identical. They are very similar. If I saw a tree like that, it would look to me like it was had been pressed by somebody. And I can't imagine a tree, a standard tree-sized tree being pressed flat. This looks like it's a botanical specimen. And if you have flowers in a tree, it is very, very rare that all the flowers are either going to be blossom forward or in perfect profile. Again, if you saw that in the natural world, I think most of us would freak out. Now, this style shows up in the Muslim world um, after they come across the writings of Plato. And Plato, in his dialogues, I believe in Republic, he goes on it quite a bit. He talks about the world of the real or the ideal, where he talks about somewhere there is a world that has the perfect or ideal tree, the perfect or ideal rock, the perfect or ideal bird. And one of the ways that we communicate when we talk about, oh, this is a bird, I saw a bird today, things like that, when people hear that kind of language, there's a part of them that responds or that is connected to that world of the ideal. And that's how we know, regardless of how many thousands of different kinds of chairs there are, they're all chairs. But for early Christians and Muslims, that became that idea of the world of the real or the world of the ideal became a metaphor for heaven and for timelessness, where in heaven things are not quite naturalistic. They're just a little bit off. This you see this a lot in Christian paintings. The saints hold their hands in very specific ways. They hold their heads in very specific ways. These people could do things that were completely naturalistic, but they chose not to because they're referencing the stylization that connects the world of the real or the ideal, rather, because that is a metaphor for heaven. And so this kind of painting, all these leaves are ideal leaves. The grass tufts are ideal grass tufts. The birds are ideal birds. They're all painted the same way. It's a type of stylization. It's a simplification, and it's a stylization that is meant to communicate something very specific. In this case, this is designed to communicate that this is a timeless story or it's a timeless symbol. It's a peaceful tree. It represents something outside of uh, time affected realistic nature. So there are reasons for this kind of thing. Now here we see another depiction of a tree. And again, if you saw this, it looks like a shadow on a wall. But if you saw this in a forest standing up at green, it would be pretty freaky. It is not naturalistic, but we can recognize it as a tree because it reminds us of that shadow. This is another simplification and shadow and stylization. And this is a stylized tree, and the tree is being abstracted. It's being simplified. Now, this is the state flag of New Hampshire. It is inspired by Patrick Henry said, The tree of liberty must occasionally be fertilized by the blood of patriots. And so this red is symbolic of sacrifice, time, energy, sometimes life, and this represents the tree of liberty. So it's a declaration. The New Hampshire flag is a declaration of loyalty and duty to the country, to the people around you, and their liberties. So, but uh, this we can read as a tree. It again, it's not naturalistic. It's very simplified, but we can see here's the top of the root ball. Here's a trunk, and these are the branches coming down. We can almost tell what species the tree is. It's a softwood. I mean, it's a yeah, it's a softwood. It's like a pine or a cedar, something like that. But it doesn't look like a naturalistic tree. We just read it as a tree, and it doesn't look naturalistic because it's very simplified. Now we look at this. I like having this next because this shows where we're really getting into the realm of abstraction. Abstract means simple. When you abstract something, you simplify it. And sometimes you move shapes around and stuff like that, but you're moving the object that you're referencing, you're moving your depiction of it away from naturalism to start reflecting more of what you think about it, or turning it into a symbol of some sort. Now, this is Japanese kanji for tree. As we look at it and we look at this, we can see there's some similarities, and it makes sense that this is a tree. Like here's that principal trunk shape. That vertical line is the same right here. And this represents the slopes of the outside limbs, these two diagonals, just like right here. And then this horizontal line could represent the horizon, but I'm thinking it might more likely be the top of the root ball there. But as people started painting this more and more, maybe it moved up, and maybe that's what that is. Or maybe this represents the rest of the trees in a forest or something. I don't know. But we can see that there is some relationship to this form, but it's gotten to the point where it's stylized. Now, when it's so stylized, it no longer has any relationship to the thing that inspired it, the natural object that inspired it, then it becomes pure symbol and the word shifts to non-objective. Non-objective means it's not related to the natural world. It doesn't have an object that it's related to. Examples of non-objective shapes are letters. Some kanji is going to be non-objective. Some kanji is an abstraction of the natural world. In the English language, the ancient roots of the letters that we use, um, some of them were related to the natural world, but it's become so abstracted over time that now when we use them, they represent ideas and sounds and not actual objects. Now here we get even more abstraction. So if you thought, so this is kind of unnerving as a naturalistic tree. This is kind of creepy. If you saw that in the natural world, this it's you can kind of see the geometry of the tree. And this, the only reason we know that these are trees is because this artist let me use this abstract painting as an example. This is these are reflections of poplars, and you have these large vertical strokes of green, and that's pretty much the only thing that can identify this as potentially a tree. But it's because it's abstracted, simplified to a couple strokes of paint. When I look at this, I know you guys are familiar with Pete Mondrian, and a lot of his paintings, I think, are wrongly classified as non-objective because they were inspired by the natural world. He lived in a time where industrialization was dramatically impacting how people live their lives. In a matter of a couple decades, went from a complete horse and buggy to copper wires and phone lines and trains that people get on in cars and all sorts of stuff very, very rapidly, making the places that people lived look a lot more busier than they had just a couple of years earlier. And this kind of painting that he did actually is an abstracted landscape. Now, expect you guys to believe me that that's fine. You don't have to. But in his paintings, a lot of these horizontal lines, he would take that incredibly complicated world that everybody was living in and simplify it to the point where it just had horizontal, vertical lines and a couple bits of color. And so this is actually a view over a park where this line, horizontal line represents clouds. This maybe represents a horizon. Maybe these are footpaths that people are walking on. These vertical lines will represent things like maybe a building over here and maybe trees, things like that. And this would represent the placement of a tree or a pond, or maybe it represents the grass over the whole park. But it's so abstracted that he is sharing with you almost entirely what he alone thinks about what he's seeing. And we get very little information to be able to identify this painting and its relationship to the natural world. So I would think that there is a good argument for declaring this as non-objective, because even though it starts off being inspired by the world around him, it has been simplified to the point where we just can't recognize any of that anymore. Now, if you don't believe me, that's fine, but I'm going to show you this. These are paintings done about every 8 to 15 years apart by Pete Mondrian. They're all by the same painter. Until at the beginning, he was an impressionist and an expressionist. And this feels very much like some of the stuff that Van Gogh was doing, where people were expressing the vibrancy of life and the energies of color by applying dabs of paint to the canvas, just so you can see the artist's emotional response to what they're seeing. Now we can identify this pretty easily as a tree. You can see the trunk, you can see the branches, there's landscape, there's a hint of a moon up there. That's fine. We can identify this is an abstracted tree. And it's abstracted in the style of expressionism. Now we look at this is where he starts getting really fascinated with just the feeling of these curving limbs. And this still is very much a tree, and you can still see the tree readily in that, but he's kind of moving away from the use of colors that are naturalistic, and he's sharing with us just the swooping feeling of those branches. When we get to here, if you didn't know that this was a tree at the beginning, I mean, I think those three paintings are all of the same tree, actually. But if you didn't know that this was a tree, it would be kind of hard to identify it as being a tree. And we can see that when these are side by side, we can see a lot of relationships. But this looks to me like he is drawing away from the swoopiness of the limbs to just entirely the movements that he felt as he interacted with the tree. I don't think that these are reading as limbs so much as just the curving lines that are inspired by the limbs that were there. He's just enjoying drawing those shapes, those forms. That's what I'm seeing in this. And so this is abstracted to the point where it's really getting very difficult to recognize the tree in there. But we still know that we can still feel that it feels organic. We can feel that it's related somehow to the natural world, and it's definitely inspired by the natural world. Now we get to where Mondrian is really trying to start simplifying the world around him. This is a very complicated painting, but instead of doing the curves, now he's doing just horizontal and vertical lines. And he's doing them in such a way that they reflect the placement of those curves, but without the curvy quality. And so, maybe there's intersections here that correspond to where the tree limbs were, but this is even more abstracted to the point where I can't see the tree in this at all. And if we have it right next to some of this one, and these others, this in a context like this, it's pretty much the only way you can identify that this is the tree. We look at this, these two are becoming more and more non-objective. So even though they're inspired by his take on the natural world, nobody else is sharing what's going on behind his eyes. And that becomes it's no longer abstraction as inspired by the natural world. It becomes non-objective abstraction, where it just feels to all the observers that it's just vertical and horizontal lines. And he is, in a very formalist way, exploring ideas of relationships as opposed to sharing what the tree is. But because of how Mondrian's mind worked, this is still, in his mind, related to that tree somehow. I just think that that is absolutely fascinating. So, what we are doing in this biomorphic abstraction, we are not copying anything we see in the natural world. We're not doing that at all. What we are doing is exploring ideas of form and shape. So, some of the things that might be inspiring to you as you work on this is looking at chewed gum. What does that do? I mean, that gives you all the shapes of the outsides of your teeth. Looking at plant forms, looking at coral, looking at sea life like tube worms and sea slugs or seashells, but not the whole shell and not the entire plant form, but elements of it. Say you really like where those kind of pillowy parts of a leaf come into each other, where that little valley of the vein on the other side is. You like that part. Maybe you really like, you've just finished eating some chicken and you like how that knuckle at the end of a bone looks as it looks like it has that kind of glossy curve to it. Maybe you like the knots in a stick or a twig that you found, or the bumps in the different sections of a piece of bamboo or wheat, or maybe you found some bones and you like the scapula or a femur or a hip. Different shapes like that are what we're looking for. Or you have a pet and you like how the just those odd shapes on the inside of their ear, how that looks, or between the toes on a paw. Those are the kinds of things I want you to have going bubbling around inside of your head as we approach this, because you're going to be carving your block into an organic abstract form. The relationship, you can tell that this is inspired by some things in the natural world. I don't know exactly what. I liked some shapes and I kind of put them together. I made something completely new. It is not designed to look like anything specific at all. When you do your carving, I don't want you to think about um, trying to make it specific to anything. Now here, I show another little bit of it where I've actually sanded this smooth, and I've tried to sand it as smooth as possible. As you build this, the biggest expenses of time are going to be as you um, design it and and the carving is going to go pretty quick, but as when you sand it down, that might be a pretty good expensive time too. Uh, just because you're trying to get it smooth, and you can see how smooth I tried to get it here. Now, this we're not going to be doing the paper mache right now. That's the last 20 minutes of the video. The paper mache is a separate assignment. And when you do your carving, what you're going to be doing is photographing the carving a couple times and sending those photos in before you cover it with the paper mache or anything like that. But are you guys getting some of what I'm talking about? Do you understand when we talk about abstract and biomorphic shapes, reflections of the natural world, and things like that? Is it making a little bit more sense to you? Okay, Anna says, yes, the shapes make more sense to me. So again, we're not copying a bone. We're not copying a piece of coral. What we're doing is looking at the different shapes and forms in the coral, in the bone. You know, how do these different planes smooth into each other? How do those ridges of the bone uh, kind of feel? If you could touch them and feel them, can you carve that feeling into the foam? The actual carving, once you design it, it may take a couple hours to design it. Once you design it, the actual carving may only take like an hour or two. And then the sanding is going to take another couple hours. But one thing that I would recommend as you're playing with this is I would just get some printer paper, tear it up into little pieces, soak it in a bag of water for a while, and you're not going to ever dump this down the drain. You're never going to do that because it'll clog the drain. But after you soak it in water, you can even mix it with a little bit of glue. And then as you pull it out, make sure that you wear gloves because if you use any glue on this stuff, it's going to attach to the hairs on the back of your hands. And even if you don't see the hairs, they are there, and you find out that they're there when you peel the glue off. Um, it's rather startling. But if you soak that paper for a day or so, and you can do it in the fridge so it doesn't smell bad, then when you pull it out, make a fist around it and squeeze as much of the water out. And you'll have this wad of paper that you can use and just use that. Squish it with your hand, play with it with your fingers, and poke your finger in, make different shapes with it. Add water to it, add some glue to it, so that you can dry and use it as a reference later. But when we do this exercise in class together, what I usually do is have people play with a little bit of throwaway clay and make a couple different forms to start with them with the design process because it's really easy if you make it what I've just described, tearing up printer paper, letting it soak overnight with water. You're basically making a giant spitball, and you're going to use that kind of smoosh it together, make different shapes. That's going to be really easy to start developing ideas of what the organic forms are going to look like in your final carving and sculpture. And then as you kind of solidify your ideas, you don't have to copy this directly, but when you make the little spitball thing and take a picture of it, then soak it again, and take another picture when you do another one. But use that to inform you as you start doing your carving. And I've seen people do sculptures where they're inspired by everything from driftwood, burnt driftwood, or bark to the spirals of plant life and combined with shells. I've seen people. One person really liked the forms in the stalk of broccoli, and he combined that with bananas and different fruits, and made this object where you could see elements of that soft inset line of a peach, and over here there's a stem of a banana, and over here there were the planes of like a succulent type plant, and just really fascinating things. You can combine this kind of stuff as you put it together. You can make it like a bone on what an alien animal's bone might look like, or you can just start playing around with different organic shapes. But the artists that are in the background info for this module are really good to look at. Look at the different kinds of things that they do. Some of the stuff that he did is going to look blocky, but you'll look at what like Henry Moore, some of the things that he did, where it almost looks like bones morphing and growing and stretching into each other, or different shapes uh, stretched over something else, and it just really fascinating different kinds of things. So keep that in mind as we go into next week. And next week, I think we're going to look at very quickly at what people have done with the structure and skin stuff. And we will look more fully into this biomorphic abstraction carving assignment as we move into that. So that's about all that I wanted to cover today. Excuse me. Liv and Anna, do you have any questions about the stuff that we talked about?
Not that I can think of.
All right. How about you, Liv? Any questions? Well, I didn't notice my computer is slipping just a little bit, and so my face is no longer in the center of the screen. Sorry about that. All right, no question. Okay, good. If you guys think of anything else when we meet again next week, please let me know and we will talk more about it. But all right, I hope you guys have a wonderful week and weekend. I am really impressed by the things that you guys are doing in this class so far. And one thing that I want to really impress on people is none of the grades are set in stone. So whatever you get, I am look at it, look at what I say if it's less than a perfect score, other than a perfect score, look at my comments, look at what I'm saying, and apply those changes and then resubmit. Because I've had people resubmit things 3, 4, 5 times. You can always get a perfect score if you keep resubmitting and changing things, responding. And if I say something that doesn't make any sense or you don't understand, email me and talk to me. I'm meeting with somebody tomorrow because they need some more clarification and help. Um, and I'm really impressed with some of the written stuff that people have been turning in. Somebody did an essay where one of the paragraphs was one long sentence, and I said, hey, I can't give you full points until you go through. Please divide this up. It might help to even read it out loud, say it out loud, and then divide it up into sentences so it reads better. And they did that and turned it back. Another person submitted an essay that wasn't quite there, because it hadn't been divided into paragraphs. And they turned around, resubmitted it, and got full points. And so one of the most common is with the annotated bibliography. Uh, one person last year, they submitted it, and I said, and we went back and forth. I think it was ultimately 3 or 4 times because they needed to divide up the writing into 2 different paragraphs. Then they needed to do the access on dates, and then they needed to alphabetize everything. But by the end, they got a perfect score. So remember that. Double check, please double check all the scores you've gotten. Make sure that I record the things that you've done. Make sure that you've turned in everything, and make sure that I regrade what you resubmit. If you resubmit something and I haven't gotten to it in a day or two, email me, and I will always respond to polite emails as quickly as I possibly can. I think it was it was last semester, a student uh, emailed me at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just happened to be up, and they told me they had submitted something, so I went back, regraded it, and then they had to resubmit it again. They did it again. We were all done by about 1:45. We went back and forth about 3 times. But, if I'm awake and I see it, I'm happy to regrade right then. So redo quizzes, redo uh, essays, redo assignments, whatever it is, redo it and resubmit so you get more points. And as you are doing your thing as well, it's really important too, as you're working on these projects, you're probably not ever going to turn any of these photos in until you're all done with it, but take process photos. That's important too, that I don't always remember to tell people, because over the last several years, I've taught these classes for over 20 years. I have had students tell me that mom came for a visit and thought there was a mess, so she threw all their stuff away. And it was the only thing that saved them that they is because they had the process photos, and they could prove to the university that they had actually done the work. Because without that, and a kind thinking person tossing your stuff, what are you going to do? I mean, there's nothing to show for your work. So I would recommend, as you're working on a project, every once in a while pause, take a photo, just so you have a record of where you're at in case something horrific actually does happen. All right, guys, I'm all done. I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a wonderful week and weekend, and I will see you Wednesday.